powerful out of Gandalf and Sauron. You have to. There's kind of 4 answers really to the question. So I'll go through all the 4 different kind of moments, times, because obviously Tolkien did say that Sauron in the Second Age, at the end of the Second Age, was far more powerful than Morgoth was at the end of the First Age. That was because Morgoth had poured his spirit into making dragons and whatnot. But ultimately, Morgoth was much more powerful than Sauron. But Morgoth put some of his power into Sauron. But let's just start with the pre-creation song. So, in spirit form, both were approximately equal. You know, it's fairly self-evident, I would say, that just as not all of the Aenir were created equal, not all of the Maiar were created equal. Gandalf is described as being the wisest of all the Maiar, and Tolkien loved parallels. So Tolkien loved parallels. So just as Melkor and Manwë were the most powerful of the Aenir, I would say that Sauron and Gandalf were among the most powerful of the Maiar. Tolkien wrote a passage that supports that Sauron and Gandalf were equal in the beginning. It was believed by many of the faithful that Gandalf was the last appearance of Manwë himself, but I think it was not so. To the overthrow of Morgoth, he sent his herald Eonwë. To the defeat of Sauron, would he not then send some lesser but mighty spirit of the angelic people, one equal, doubtless, with Sauron in their beginnings, but not more? Olorin was his name, but of Olorin we shall never know more than he revealed in Gandalf. And that's directly from the Unfinished Tales, that quote there. I would note at this point that it is specifically Gandalf mentioned, but not any of the other Astari. Saruman was their elected leader, but not leader by default of power. Gandalf was actually the first asked to be leader, which he refused. I would say that upon creation, Saruman was weaker than Gandalf and Saruman, and that he has spent his entire existence trying to increase his power, leading to his jealousy and bitter hatred of Gandalf and eventual betrayal. Gandalf was hand-selected and sent by Manwë. Even when Gandalf said he couldn't do it, he was afraid, and he was just in fear of Sauron, to which Manwë replied, "That's why you must go." We also know that Manwë and Uru had personal counsel together. But I'll talk a bit more about where Uru might come in when Gandalf became Gandalf the White. Gandalf was hand-selected as one of the Astari, remember that, and Saruman volunteered. It was also Gandalf's idea, really, that they shouldn't have their full powers, much because of what happened in the First Age in War of the Wrath, when pretty much the Valar just ruined entirely Middle-earth. They completely ruined it, and thousands of lives were lost. So Gandalf much supported that he preferred to advise and study Middle-earth and counsel men rather than reveal himself and in his true power. Hence the reason why they were ultimately old men. Post-creation song in the Undying Lands, Sauron was more powerful. After the creation of the world, the Maiar descended into Arda. Mairon, which was Sauron's name, began studying under Aul, who created the dwarves, learning craftsmanship. This is where Saruman also was taught under. Olorin Gandalf, on the other hand, learned pity and patience from Nienya. He also delighted in watching the owls and seemed to be overall a very gentle soul. Still new, at least to a physical form, and young without being as emotional and driven as he would be later. During this time, Sauron increased his skills beyond his inborn power as a strong Maiar. Gandalf seemed to mostly stagnate power-wise, though his wisdom increased during this time, leading him to be called the wisest of the Maiar. There's also the third kind of comparison, and that is Gandalf the Grey versus the second birth of Sauron. Sauron would probably have the edge there as well. At this point, Sauron has lost the Ring of Power. He has also begun to feel the effects of the mission, which is the fate of all that rebel against Uru, or rather it seems use their power for a purpose outside of Uru's. When Morgoth created his armies, the dragons, volcanoes, etc., he had to use the power from within rather than the ambient energy from Uru, which Gandalf could use. It seems that when a being uses power from within, it is not replaced. Morgoth, who at one time was able to hold off all of the Valar combined, was later captured by Ungolant, a being likely on the same order as the Mayor, and possibly a corrupted one. And he needed aid from the Balrogs. He let out this mighty scream, and the Balrogs come and saved his ass from Ungolant, who's Shelob's mother, and the mother of all spiders. She ended up eating all the darkness in the world. She consumed herself. Anyway, Morgoth, this was after he began feeling the effects of diminishing. Sauron and Saruman used their powers the same way, albeit on a lesser scale, and so diminished too. Because he was diminishing the advantage he had of being unfettered by human form, as the Astari were. By losing the ring, he lost all of the advantage that he gained over Gandalf because of his study under Aiur and Morgoth. This is all after the fall of Númenor, the loss of his physical body, so he was unable to shapeshift like he was before into vampires or werewolves, or into when he was known as when he used to appear in an elf form, and the loss of his physical body forced him to expend a lot of energy to create a new one, resulting in yet even more diminishing. Now, if we study Gandalf at this time, he was bound, as all the Astari were, in a human-like form, clad in bodies of men, real and not feigned, but subject to the fears and pains and weariness of earth, able to hunger and thirst and be slain. But they also suffered the emotional flaws of men, something that Gandalf as a Olorin wouldn't have. This resulted in them being far less powerful than they were as pure spirits. However, since they were forbidden from matching power with power, it can be assumed that they still had enough power to be able to destroy parts of Middle-earth in any conflict, as this is what the Valar were trying to avoid. Gandalf was also afraid of Sauron. However, I always took this to mean he was less combat-oriented than Sauron. Also, the last time he saw Sauron would have been just before Sauron left, a being with at least the same power as Gandalf and far more knowledge in combat. He wouldn't have known how far Sauron had diminished. Olorin declared that he was too weak for such a task and that he feared Sauron. Plus, would you want to fight against an opponent with a 50-50 chance of beating you and then killing eternally, torturing you? Because that's what Sauron would do. We know that Sauron, even without the ring, was stronger than Saruman. Saruman the White fell from his high errand. He was ensnared by the dark spirit. Sauron, mightier than he. This is referring specifically to Sauron's spirit, not his full might, like his armies or the Nazgul. So in single combat, Saruman proved the weaker. However, we have reason to believe that Gandalf was stronger than Saruman upon creation and stronger at the time of their arrival in Middle-earth. From the first meetings at the Grey Havens, Círdan divined in Gandalf the greatest spirit and the wisest, and he welcomed him with reverence, and he gave to his keeping the third ring, Nahia the Red, the ring of white fire. This is reiterated later on when Tolkien talks about Círdan's perception that Gandalf was the greatest of all of them. Sauron soon became jealous of Gandalf, and this rivalry turned at last to a hatred, the deeper for being concealed, and the more bitter. And Saruman knew in his heart that the Grey Wanderer had the greater strength, and that the greater influence upon the dwellers in Middle-earth, even though he hid his power and desired neither fear nor reverence. Sauron did not revere him, but he grew to fear him. Saruman even started smoking pipe weed because Gandalf did, and he hid it behind his back. Gandalf even found out but didn't want to embarrass Saruman. And Saruman used to take the piss out of him while he was smoking it. But yeah, Saruman grew to fear Gandalf, being ever uncertain how much Gandalf perceived of his inner mind, troubled more by his silences than by his words. At the White Councils, Gandalf used to just sit there and smoke a pipe and not say a word. Also, when Saruman the White imprisoned Gandalf the Grey, Gandalf would have been sucker punched because he was not expecting Saruman's betrayal. Saruman would have used everything in his first shot, as his jealousy of Gandalf would also have made him extremely fucking cautious. Gandalf also would not have fought back all that much. And would not have tried to match force with force, like broken the rule. Even while both in their human-like forms, any combat using their full power, what they had access to at least, which wasn't restricted, between the two would have resulted in a struggle in enough to destroy parts of Middle-earth. Like, it would have destroyed the Orthanc completely. He knew Saruman needed him, and that he would then have a chance to escape. That's where his wisdom comes in. Therefore, he wouldn't necessarily have felt the need to fight back. And he also knew that Strider Aragorn would meet Frodo for him if he needed. Gandalf, in his bound form as Grey, defeated a Balrog with limited damage to the land. Balrogs were also Maya spirits, unfettered, unlike the Astari, so they had the advantage of being unrestricted. Also, while initially Sauron's underling, the Balrog would not have felt as much of a diminishing effect as Sauron, as they did not create and other things the way Sauron and Morgoth did, nor would it have put most of its power into a ring that was then lost. Gandalf, even as a semi-mortal old man, defeated the Balrog. Gandalf also held off Sauron's Nazgul at the time on Weathertop. That's only in the books. In the books, you see like a white lightning in the sky. You see white flames, and Frodo sees it, and Aragorn just describes it as just a storm. It's actually Gandalf taking on all 9 as Gandalf the Grey. And like the Nazgul wouldn't go near Gandalf in the daytime, but at night they did. So next to the Ring of Power, I would say that Sauron invested the most strength into his servants. So by making the Nazgul and whatnot, he makes himself a lot weaker. That's why Sauron took the rings back off at Nazgul, because if they had their rings, they would have been a lot stronger, but they might not have necessarily been under Sauron's dominance if Sauron didn't have the ring for so long. Another point as well that I would make is that when Frodo offered the ring to Gandalf, Gandalf would have been influenced by it, yes, but as Tolkien said, he would have been a power too great and terrible to imagine. I do not wish to become like the Dark Lord himself. Gandalf obviously thought that if he took up the ring, it would end just as badly as if Sauron got the ring. This idea is reiterated in letter 246 in Letters by Tolkien, where Tolkien states that Gandalf with the ring would have been worse than Sauron, both in power and corruption. So this is Sauron, Gandalf as an Astari, as an old man with the ring, would have been more powerful than Sauron. So that says a lot. So because both Gandalf and Sauron were acting under restrictions at that time, it is hard to say who would win in single combat. But I would say that Gandalf was definitely more powerful than Saruman at the time, and that he would probably be approximately equal to Sauron, mano, mare versus mare, as long as Sauron didn't have the ring. If Sauron got the ring, he would definitely be more stronger than Gandalf. The last one is Gandalf the White versus the second birth of Sauron.